History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes with terrifying precision. Over the past 5 centuries, 3 global empires have risen to dominate the world: Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. And each believed it was exceptional. Each thought it could escape the laws of decline that had destroyed its predecessors. Yet one by one, they fell. Now in 2025, the United States walks that same familiar path, step by step, decision by decision, mirroring the pattern that has spelled the end for every great power before it. This is not a story about conquest or war, but about decay from within. It is a map of collapse, a 7-stage pattern that begins with pride and ends in silence. Empires always begin with strength, then collapse under the weight of trying to sustain it. In the 16th century, Spain commanded fleets across 4 continents, its armies marching through the Mediterranean, the Americas, and Asia. By the 20th, Britain ruled 6 continents, declaring the sun would never set on its empire. The Soviet Union built vast armies to project control from Eastern Europe to Cuba. And now the United States maintains over 700 military bases in 80 nations, spending more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. They all made the same mistake, believing their reach could extend forever. But power stretched too far begins to crack. The first fracture in every empire comes when its might exceeds its means. When power costs more than it yields, empires reach for an easier solution: money. Spain diluted its silver with copper to fund endless wars. Britain printed more notes than its gold reserves could support. The Soviet Union created a currency worth less than the paper it was printed on. America's version came in 1971, when President Nixon cut the dollar from gold. Since then, the dollar has been backed by nothing but confidence, a fragile foundation for a global empire. From 2000 to 2025, the money supply has exploded by hundreds of percent, with trillions created from nothing. Every empire that devalues its currency buys time, but at the cost of trust. And when trust fades, collapse follows. Debt is the quiet destroyer of nations. Spain defaulted 4 times in 40 years. Britain emerged from 2 world wars bankrupt. The Soviet Union's debts drained its last reserves of gold and oil. Today, America's national debt surpasses $36 trillion, larger than its entire economy. Interest payments alone now exceed military spending. Each generation borrows from the next, believing growth will save them. But the math is merciless. Borrowing to pay yesterday's debts is not strategy. It is surrender. When an empire owes more than it owns, the countdown to decline has already begun. Wealth breeds comfort, and comfort kills creativity. When the riches of conquest flow in, production stops. Spain stopped manufacturing, living instead off silver from the New World. Britain lost its industries to America and Germany. The Soviet Union stagnated in bureaucracy and inefficiency. Today, the United States imports nearly everything, from steel and medicine to microchips for its own weapons. The trade deficit has ballooned beyond $800 billion a year. When production dies, innovation withers. And when a nation consumes more than it creates, the empire begins to rot from within, hollowed by its own abundance. As economies weaken, societies fracture. In late imperial Spain, corruption and poverty spread like disease. Britain after the wars faced unemployment, strikes, and disillusionment. The Soviet Union in the 1980s dissolved under cynicism and apathy. Modern America shows the same symptoms: political division, collapsing trust, and social despair. Crime rates rise, drug overdoses claim 100,000 lives yearly, and birth rates hit historic lows. Each side blames the other, yet the rot lies deeper, in values, in cohesion, in belief. Every empire reaches a stage where its people stop believing in the idea that built it. That is the 5th stage, the decay of the soul. The 6th stage begins when the world loses faith in the empire's money. Once, the Spanish real was the global reserve. Then came the British pound. Now it is the US dollar, but not for much longer. Nations of the BRICS alliance trade in yuan and ruble. Saudi Arabia accepts payment for oil in Chinese currency. Central banks hoard gold instead of dollars. As global trust fades, trillions will flow back to American shores, igniting inflation and eroding prosperity. The fall of a reserve currency is not just economic, it is psychological. It marks the moment when the world looks elsewhere for stability. Collapse is not slow, it happens all at once. The Soviet Union fell in less than 1,000 days. Britain lost its empire in 20 years. Spain's decline took a century, but its fate was sealed long before the final fall. When currencies crumble, debts mount, and trust disappears, empires die suddenly. For America, the warning lights are flashing. Stage 6 has begun. Stage 7 lurks just ahead. Collapse will not arrive with an explosion, but with exhaustion. A society too divided to stand, too indebted to move, and too proud to change. History whispers, it is almost time. Every empire believes it is different. Spain had faith in God and gold. Britain believed in trade and empire. The Soviets trusted ideology. America believes in freedom and exceptionalism. Yet all shared the same fatal flaw: hubris. The refusal to believe that decline could touch them. When nations start to think themselves immortal, they begin to die. History does not punish arrogance, it simply waits for it to collapse under its own weight. Empires collapse not because of enemies outside, but because of rot within. The barbarians never truly destroy civilizations. They simply walk into the ruins after the decay is complete. In the late stages, a society turns inward. Entertainment replaces discipline. Outrage replaces purpose. Bread and circuses for Rome, reality shows for America. The forms of greatness remain, but the spirit is gone. And when spirit dies, the empire follows. Some historians argue that decline is not inevitable, that nations can reform before they fall. Britain reinvented itself as a financial and cultural power. Spain stabilized after centuries of hardship. Even Russia, after collapse, survived. Yet no empire has ever returned to global dominance once it began to decay. The United States could defy the odds, but not without sacrifice, humility, and a reckoning with its own excess. Whether it will choose that path remains to be seen. Throughout history, collapse is not only a tragedy, it is a teacher. Each fall reveals the same lesson: power without discipline, money without value, and society without unity cannot endure. The pattern is not prophecy, but probability. Empires fall when they forget what made them rise. The United States still has time, but time is running out, and history is an unforgiving accountant. The fall of an empire is not a single event. It is a long unraveling that only looks sudden in hindsight. Spain ignored the warnings until its fleets rusted. Britain watched its colonies slip away, one by one. The Soviets laughed at the thought of collapse until the walls literally fell. America may already be past the point of no return. Once faith in money, leadership, and unity is lost, recovery becomes a dream, not a plan. In every fallen empire, art becomes nostalgia. Architecture grand but empty. Songs about a greatness already gone. America too has begun to memorialize itself. Movies, monuments, and slogans, recalling the greatest generation. When nations begin to worship their past, it means they've stopped building their future. That is how decline becomes permanent. As the seventh stage nears, the collapse accelerates. Economic tremors turn into political crises. Confidence vanishes overnight. People cling to ideology or escape into distraction. The government grows desperate, then authoritarian, promising stability it can no longer deliver. In Spain, it was the Inquisition. In Britain, imperial control. In the USSR, total surveillance. In the United States, who knows? Desperation always breeds control, and control always comes too late. Collapse feels sudden, but it is the sum of decades. It begins with neglect, then corruption, then the loss of belief. The true moment of death is not when the empire falls, but when its people stop caring that it has. The lights still burn, the flags still wave, but no one looks up anymore. That silence, apathetic, endless, is the sound of empire's end. History has no favorites. It rewards discipline, punishes indulgence, and forgets those who fail to learn. The United States stands at the same crossroads that Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union once faced. Each ignored the warnings. Each paid the price. Whether America's story ends or evolves depends not on destiny, but on choices made now, before Stage 7 becomes irreversible. 3 empires once said, "We are different." And 3 times history answered, "No, you are not." The law of decline cares nothing for pride, technology, or faith. When consumption replaces creation, when money loses value, when unity dissolves into division, the end is only a matter of when, not if. Perhaps America will reform, perhaps it will fall. But either way, history will record another line in its endless cycle. The empire has fallen, for